What's up, y'all? So today wanted to talk about basically uh Trump again, who I know I've been making some videos about him more recently, but I think he's a really important case study in understanding American politics, and basically the state of the country right now. So I specifically want to talk about this notion that basically what's kind of two notions wrapped up into one. It's that Trump won because he tapped into racism, tapped into the racist nature of the United States. And then that kind of gets, thrown into the conversation a lot when people are talking about, well, he also won because Russia helped him, right? So both of these reasons are complete BS. This is not why he won the election. He didn't win because he tapped into the racist underbelly. He didn't win because Russian memes, were his catalyst to power. He won because he ran a better campaign than Hillary Clinton, which is amazing because she had the entire political establishment behind her, but she didn't promise anything. She had no message for people. Guess what? Trump had a message and it resonated with a lot of people. So he won, unsurprisingly. And I mean, first to just address this idea that Trump won because of racism. Well, we know that that's doesn't really make sense because you look at this, these former Obama strongholds sealed the election for Trump, right? So Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Obama won all these states twice in 2008 and 2012. He won all these states by a good margin. And then Trump comes along in 2016 and 2020 and actually won most of these areas. I think Florida went to Biden in 2020, but Trump, stayed strong basically in the Rust Belt in the Midwest. So if he won because of racism, well, why did all these people who voted for him also vote for Obama? It's because he didn't run on racism. He ran on bringing their jobs back. He ran on, we're going to bring coal jobs back to coal country. We're going to bring industrial jobs back to the Rust Belt. We're going to give people Medicare for all. We're going to do all this stuff. And people liked that, He was an outsider. And in 2008, Obama also kind of seemed like an outsider, right? Because, I mean, not only is he a black guy with a Muslim name, which was unheard of in most American politics, but also he was promising things that other politicians hadn't been for a really long time. Obama also promised healthcare. Obama, like Trump, also promised to end the wars. Obama also, gave lip service to the Rust Belt in some ways and said, we're going to bring jobs back. We're going to fix the economy. So it doesn't really matter who the message comes from. People clearly don't care. They want actual change. They want actual hope. They want a real, non-establishment politician. And unfortunately, in both cases, they got an establishment politician. Obama caved the establishment. He had already caved before he even started running. His entire cabinet was chosen by Citigroup. And Trump, I don't know if he had totally caved when he was running, but by the time he got in, he had, because he didn't do any of the things he said he was going to do. He didn't end the wars. He didn't give people health care. He didn't help the Rust Belt. He didn't bring jobs back. He didn't make us more competitive. He actually decreased our competitiveness globally. So people were tricked twice. Anyways, this, I think, understanding how these counties swung from Obama to Trump is really important. And I mean, that kind of undoes this idea. This is one of the first articles Vox ran after Trump won in 2016. They said Trump's win is a reminder of the incredible, unbeatable power of racism. He tapped into the most powerful force in America. Okay. You know what? I'm sure there were some people who voted for him purely based off racism. They were like, this guy, he's going to make us into a white ethno state that we need to be. Okay, there was probably some freaks like that. And David Duke did endorse Donald Trump and said, this is our guy. So, yeah, I mean, Trump ran on some racist rhetoric, he doesn't have any ideology. So he kind of just adopted this Christian fundamentalist evangelical ideology, which often gets tied into bigotry and racism. And, I think that was a real component of his rhetoric. I'm not trying to belittle that idea, but the notion that alone, he tapped into that and it was over. That's all it took. A bunch of racist white guys just came out of the forest magically and were like, let's elect Donald Trump. No, what the fuck are you talking about? he didn't win because he won because he ran a better campaign. Again, Hillary sucked and people didn't like her. And yeah, he was a con man and he was a charlatan and they knew he was a bullshitter. People were like, good, go bullshit the people we hate in Washington. He said he was going to drain the swamp. What politician has said that in the last 30 years? So again, not because of racism. And then, so 2020 rolls around. Vox posts this article. Trump made gains with black voters in some states. Here's why. With disinformation and economic promises, Trump lobbied hard for black votes in the final days of the campaign. So for the second part of this, yeah, he did make some really empty promises, economic promises, specifically to the black community and people of color all over the country. To be fair, he did that to literally everyone, and every politician does this to literally everyone. That's not an excuse. He shouldn't be making empty economic promises, but he did do that, and that potentially swayed people of color to vote for him. But this part is something that gets thrown out a lot by the mainstream media. They act as though it's so easy for the votes of people of color to be swayed by disinformation. They act like, oh, these stupid people of color have no real ideology. Their opinion can be swayed so easily by some Russian memes, and that is actually so racist to continue to propagate this idea that people of color aren't smart enough to be able to choose who they want to vote for. You know what? There was probably a lot of people of color out there who are incredibly smart and voted for Trump and were like, you know what? I'm not voting for Biden and I have my reasons. And we have to respect that. We can't just be like, oh, you were misinformed. Da, 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 da. It's like, no, they probably had a reason for voting Trump just as much as anybody else. And granted, most people of color didn't vote for Trump, but he made gains with the Black and Latino community in the 2020 election. So I think that continues to undo this notion that Trump won because of racism, right? Trump did not win because of racism. I'm really trying to just underline that for people. The other thing that gets thrown around a lot, I don't have articles for this pulled up, but there are millions that I could pull up. Is that he won because of Russia, right? He won because of Russian memes or something. So this idea originally kind of started getting floated in like 2015, not super seriously. They were just kind of like, hey, what's up with Russia? What's up with Trump having all these business dealings in Russia? And, pretty early on, Trump was kind of like, hey, let's try not to have a terrible relationship with Russia. Like, let's try to build relationships. And for some reason, that triggered like the entire left. That made everyone freak out. They're like, no, you need to be a war hawk. You need to be constantly like with Russia. I'm like, why? What's the point of that? Like, don't you want better foreign relations on a global scale? That's what Trump was advocating for. He was running on it. And a lot of people like that because guess what? Most people don't want the Cold War. That's actually not a very appealing thing to run on. So, there was that. And the story kind of evolved. And 2016 starts rolling around. They're throwing full-blown accusations at him that he's an agent of the Russian government, which is a insane claim to make. And I will admit, for a while, I was believing it just because this is before I read Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky, which everybody should read. So I believed everything CNN and NBC told me. And I was like, yeah, it seems like, based on the evidence here, Trump's a Russian agent. This was an evidence-free conspiracy theory. There was no evidence. They were pushing it for like 2 years, right? So the Mueller report comes out in like 2018, 2019, whatever, 2 or 3 years after they've been pushing this whole thing and finds no collusion, no evidence of collusion, or at least no clear evidence, right? There was a few calls between Trump and Russia, but there's just as much collusion between him and Russia as there is between the Clintons and Russia and Biden and Russia and Obama and Russia. So it's not like Trump has some kind of special tie and he's some kind of fucking KGB agent who's going to take down the US. It's not true. So the Mueller report comes out and everybody's like, wow, anticlimactic. I'm like, what do you mean? Aren't you glad we have the truth now? No, they're not, because everyone continued to act as though that report either didn't happen or produced different results, because they're still Russiagating to this day. If you watch mainstream left news, CNN, MSNBC, whatever, they still talk about connections between Trump and Russia. They talk about connections between anybody they don't like in Russia. Trump was just the first one that they used for this McCarthy smear, but now they'll say it about anybody. Like, and I mean, they are still saying about Trump. Hillary Clinton on her podcast the other day had Nancy Pelosi on. What a duo, right? Hillary Clinton and Nancy on a podcast, but they were basically both saying they want to see the phone records between Trump and Putin because they know there's something there, right? This was like 2 weeks ago that they're saying this. So they're still, that's where their focus is. And they're also, so like I said, he was the first one they used to do this smear on, but they've done it for Tulsi Gabbard. They've done it for Andrew Yang. They've done it for a bunch of progressives too, when they're saying, oh, these people are also Russian agents. So it's a very easy thing with no evidence to just throw at somebody. And I mean, Trump's actions immediately as president should have proven, okay, all that stuff was actually BS. Because, right, what's one of the first things he does as president? He sold a bunch of arms to Ukraine, which is something Obama had refused to do for 8 years. Trump was like, maybe he didn't want to, but he did it. It was his decision to do that. You know, he sold a ton of arms to Ukraine and was funding groups fighting against Russia. So it right off the bat, it's like, okay, well, that's not, if he's a Putin puppet, he's probably not going to be waging war against Russia. That doesn't really make sense. The other thing is immediately he blocked a pipeline from Germany to Russia that would be super beneficial to Russia and Putin. But Trump pulled out pretty much all the stops to make sure that didn't happen. And it worked. He managed to stop it. So, and there's tons of other instances like this where he's doing things that are in the interest of the United States, proving two things. Number one, Trump is a puppet of the establishment. He lied. He's not going to drain the swamp. He's part of the swamp. Number two, he's not a Russian agent. He's an American CIA agent, just like every other president. So the question you might be asking is, why am I spending so much breath going into detail about why Trump didn't win because of racism or Russia? Because we need to understand the real reason that Trump won. Otherwise, we're going to get another Trump, and he's probably going to be more competent, which is way more scary. And right, so what is the real reason? Is because our political system is completely failing. You don't get Donald Trump because things are great. You get Donald Trump because a black guy with a Muslim name, Obama, comes in and says he's going to do all this amazing stuff. People are so excited. Not only do we have a first black president, but we have a guy who's talking about hope and change. He's talking about healthcare. He's talking about all this stuff. People are like, he's going to be FDR. And then he governs like Ronald Reagan. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I'm not. On a policy level, George Bush, Ronald Reagan, and Barack Obama, indistinguishable. If I just gave you the policies, you wouldn't know who's who. So, and people notice. You can't just do that and have people be like, it's okay, you know, whatever. So Obama failed people, and he failed all those people in the Rust Belt. And when Trump comes along, they're like, okay, you know what? We're going to roll the dice on this guy because the last guy seemed really great, but then did all the same shit. And so we're gonna take a gamble here. That's going to happen again, right? Because now we've got Biden, and he's doing all the same stuff. He's governing like Ronald Reagan. He's governing like Obama. He's governing like Trump. They're all the same. So if another person comes along, they can just tap into the same thing Trump tapped into, except this time it's going to be even more invigorated because there's so many aspects to this, but like the polarization in America now is at a more heightened level than it was in 2016 when Trump originally won. So in 2024, if somebody new comes along or Trump runs again, I think that he or the new person has a great chance of winning. And it's for all the same reasons he won in 2016. So I think understanding this is really important. There is no critical self-reflection done by the left or Democrats of like, hey, how the heck did we lose to Trump in 2016, right? Hillary seemed pretty cool. Hillary seemed pretty great. Would have been the first woman president, you know, seemed way more competent and articulate and like not an asshole. And she still lost. What's up with that? And Trump actually ran a pretty close campaign against Biden too. Like everybody was like, "Oh, it's such a landslide." I'm like, was it? I mean, he won by like 3 or 4 million votes. That's not really a landslide, especially when you consider that, you know, the popular vote doesn't even really determine it's all about the electoral college, which kind of came down to the wire. So Trump almost won again in 2020. It's frankly shocking that weekend at Bernie's Biden won it. I don't even know. That's just amazing to me. But I really thought Trump was going to win. I mean, again, I voted for Biden, but I wasn't hopeful, you know, about any aspect of it. So anyways, hope this video was clear and concise and explain my thoughts on this. Again, maybe I feel like it's worth saying I'm not a Trump supporter. I hope that's obvious. And I shouldn't even have to say that when making these points. But unfortunately, you say anything that's counteracting the mainstream narrative, and all these liberals want to accuse you of being a Trumper or whatever, conservative. No, I'm far left. I'm actually further left than most liberals in America today. That's why I make them so uncomfortable, because I'm calling out all their hypocrisy. So that's kind of the situation. Really hope we don't end up with a worse Trump or Trump again. Either option is horrible, but it's, you know, I would not be surprised, because Biden sucks too, and he's letting the wounds of America fester right now as we speak. And it's disgusting, and it's evil, and it's horrible. And the American people deserve better. And eventually they're going to demand something new. And that could come in the form of a really ugly movement. And honestly, it's likely that it will come in that form. You know, everyone looks at January 6th and the Capitol insurrection and goes, oh my God, like, what are we going to do about all these crazy racists? Let's censor them and take them all off Twitter. It's like, well, you can't just delete them from existence, right? Okay, yeah, their anger manifested in a way that was weird and just vulgar, and you might not understand it. You know, there's a guy running around with horns on his head and he's got a big Trump flag. Yeah, MAGA 2020 forever. It's like, okay, I don't really get this, but obviously you got a lot of people here who are really upset. So let's get to the bottom of why people are upset. I don't think it's just because everybody's crazy QAnon conspiracy theorists. I think most Americans are actually pretty rational people. And I think people are so disenfranchised that these crazy rabbit hole routes are starting to become more and more appealing. You know, and not only that, every time they flip on mainstream media, they're getting shit on. So, you know, they're all they want to talk about is how stupid and racist and horrible all these Trump voters and QAnon believers and all these people are. So what do you think happens of it ultimately? You just continue to sow this division between Americans. So that's another case where there's no critical reflection of what the heck actually happened here. You know, January 6th is just like, oh, open and shut case. Bunch of racists went crazy. That's all we know. That's all that happened. Whatever. That's all that matters. No, that's not. You need an actual investigation, but one will not take place. And we're going to have an actual insurrection at some point that will, I don't even know what it'll look like, but it'll definitely be more ugly than that. I'll tell you what. And anyways, so thanks for watching. Vote third party in the midterms and in 2024. We need to start building a third party movement. And yeah, hope y'all have a good rest of your Monday.